the universe had always underestimated humanity. For centuries, we had been the chaos in the perfect machine of the galaxy, the unpredictable force that somehow survived amidst untold dangers. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of the universe's most powerful species, saw humans as nothing more than primitive, unruly creatures from a planet known as Earth, a death world where life was harsh and unforgiving. We had no place in their perfect order, they thought. We were the outcasts, the dangerous unknowns, and they had long ago learned to push us around. But as I stood before the delegation of the Galactic Concord, my thoughts weren't on their judgment. I knew, with a cold certainty, that today would be the day they learned just how wrong they had been. My name is Captain Kayla Rourke, and I had lived my life on the edge. Born on Earth, I served in the United Earth Federation's Special Forces. I had fought battles across my homeworld, on foreign planets, and in the dark recesses of space. My reputation as a tactician and a fighter preceded me. But now, standing on the floor of the Galactic Concord, my mission was not to fight, at least, not yet. Today, I had been sent to negotiate for humanity's future. The room was massive, towering with glass walls that gave a panoramic view of the city below, a shining beacon of wealth and power. Species from across the galaxy filled the seats. The Katuri, massive reptilian beings, their scales glistening like jewels, sat to one side, their yellow eyes never leaving me. Across from them were the Sanos, a race of cerebral beings who prided themselves on intellect and subtlety. Their cold, calculating gazes felt more invasive than the Katuri's hostile stares. Finally, the Zentari, the brutal warriors, stood in the back, their powerful figures looming like a dark cloud. They were the kind of species that understood one thing above all: strength. They didn't hide their contempt for us. I had been briefed on the issues at hand, on the delicate negotiations that were supposed to take place today. Earth's growing influence had caused a ripple through the established order. Our technology was advancing, our economy was stabilizing, and we were no longer the weak, backwater species they had once thought us to be. But the Concord was a delicate web of power, and some species, like the Katuri, were threatened by the rise of humans. They wanted to ensure that Earth remained subjugated. A treaty had already been signed in the background, a treaty that would strip humanity of its military power, leaving us unable to defend ourselves. No human had even been allowed a seat at the table when the deal was made. I was here to change that. But in this room, it wasn't just diplomacy I needed to rely on. The Katuri had already set their traps. The Sanos had planned their manipulation. And the Zentari? They would wait for an excuse to draw their blades. There was no room for weakness here. I knew, as my team and I had discussed before stepping into the Concord's chambers, that if we didn't take action soon, we would be left at the mercy of the very species that had spent centuries trying to control us. My voice broke the silence. I've reviewed the terms of the treaty, I said, my tone steady, and I'll be honest, I don't like what I see. Humanity deserves a seat at this table, not as a servant, but as an equal. The room shifted. The Katuri, ever the aggressors, bristled. The Sanos tilted their heads, as if the very idea of humanity standing as equals was an absurdity. The Zentari grunted, clearly unimpressed by my boldness. You misunderstand, Captain Rourke, said Koresh, the leader of the Katuri, his voice low and rumbling like the growl of a predator. Your species is nothing but a threat to the peace of this galaxy. You are nothing more than chaos in a universe that thrives on order. Chaos? I repeated, my voice hardening. I prefer the term survival. Something you might want to look into, given your long history of being conquerors and oppressors. I could feel the temperature in the room rise, a palpable tension. The Sanos leader, Erix, leaned forward, his thin lips curling into a smile that wasn't quite friendly. Your species is chaotic, yes, but you're also weak. You survive because you have no choice. But once you're placed under the right constraints, you'll realize that there's no place for humanity in the grand design of the galaxy. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath steady, as I clenched my fists at my sides. I knew they were testing me, trying to goad me into making a mistake. But I had a plan. I wasn't about to let these creatures believe for a second that we would roll over and die under their rule. Our survival is exactly why we belong here, I countered, raising my voice just enough to let it ring in the silent room. We thrive where others fail. And we are not afraid to fight to defend what's ours. The silence that followed was deafening. Koresh's cold, reptilian eyes narrowed. Eric's calculating gaze bored into me. The Zentari leader, Drax, cracked his knuckles in anticipation, clearly eager to show just how much order they could impose if they had their way. I could see their underestimation, their arrogance, and I knew it was time to pull the trigger on our backup plan. I gave the signal to my team. Hidden among the crowd, our operative activated the first phase of humanity's ultimate weapon, a weapon no one expected us to have. A quiet hum filled the air, barely perceptible, as a sudden, massive electromagnetic pulse pulsed through the Concorde's security systems, sending a shockwave through the chamber. The energy shields flickered, the holographic systems that projected our negotiation tables began to glitch, and every single piece of high-tech equipment in the room went black. The alien leaders froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. The Xanos leader stood, his hand raised, but he was unable to manipulate the tech around him. The Katuri hissed, swiping at the air as their weapons failed to power up. The Zentari gripped their blades, but they were useless without the enhanced technology they relied on. We've had enough, I declared, standing tall. This isn't about chaos. This is about survival. And today, you'll learn the price of underestimating the Deathworlders. Koresh stepped forward, his massive form looming, but I was unfazed. The power was now in our hands. They had no idea what humanity had been preparing in the shadows, what we were capable of. The galaxy had never seen a species like us, and we were about to make sure they never forgot the day the Deathworlders stopped playing nice. The echo of the EMP pulse faded, but the tension in the room remained. I stood tall, facing down the collective representatives of the Galactic Concorde. Their arrogance, their sense of superiority, it was all shattered in one moment. They were no longer in control. But they were far from defeated. We're far from finished, human, Koresh, the Katuri leader, growled, his reptilian eyes flashing with barely contained rage. You think this is your victory? This is just the beginning. Then let's make sure it's your last, I replied, my voice cold but unyielding. I gestured to my team, hidden among the shadows of the chamber, waiting for my signal. It was time to implement the second phase of our plan. The Katuri, Xanos, and Zentari had no idea what was coming. What they failed to realize was that while they had been scheming and making their moves, humanity had been quietly preparing. The weapon we had just deployed wasn't just a show of force, it was a calculated strike to disable their technology, disrupt their command structure, and leave them vulnerable. The EMP pulse wasn't just a tool, it was a message: do not underestimate us again. As the representatives of the Galactic Concorde fumbled with their malfunctioning devices, I made my way to the center of the room, my team flanking me. We don't need your technology to win, I said, my voice steady. We have something you don't, the will to fight, to survive. And that's what makes us dangerous. For a moment, there was silence. The Katuri leader, Koresh, was the first to react. His massive hand slapped the table, sending a ripple through the air. You think your primitive tricks can stop us? You are nothing but insects, barely worth crushing. I'll let you decide that for yourselves, I said, stepping closer to him, not flinching under his glare. But you'll have to get through me first. There was a flicker of hesitation in Koresh's eyes. Perhaps he realized that I wasn't bluffing, that the humans had, at last, found the courage to stand up to the galaxy's most powerful species. The Xanos leader, Erix, spoke next, his voice smooth, calculating. Your efforts are futile, Captain Rourke. Even if you've disabled our tech, you can't stop the inevitable. The Zentari are already mobilizing to crush your pathetic resistance. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. You're wrong, Erix. It's not about brute force anymore. It's about adaptation, strategy. And you've just handed us the advantage. As the words left my mouth, I could see it, the shift in the room. The alien leaders were no longer so sure of themselves. The Katuri growled in frustration, their weaponry useless. The Sanos' reliance on technology had failed them. The Zentari were left with only their martial prowess, but even that was a limited advantage in a world that was rapidly changing. I turned to my team. Deploy the secondary units. We take the fight to them. The Concord will not make decisions without understanding the cost of their actions. The plan had been in motion for weeks. While the Concord focused on undermining Earth, humanity had worked in the shadows, using its ingenuity to create new methods of warfare, methods no one had anticipated. The EMP pulse was just the beginning. We had a series of high-tech countermeasures, stealth devices, and adaptive tactics that would turn the tide in our favor. The Sanos leader, still struggling to recalibrate his devices, narrowed his eyes. "You think your tricks will be enough to save you?" His voice had lost its former calm, and I could see his facade of superiority crumbling. "We don't need tricks," I replied. "We just need the resolve to fight, to do whatever it takes to protect our future." My team moved into position, their faces set with determination. There was no turning back now. We had come this far, and we weren't about to lose everything because of a few arrogant species who thought they could control the galaxy. The Zentari leader, Drax, stepped forward, his massive form towering over us. "You've made a mistake, human. A fatal one." I didn't flinch. "We're still standing. And that's something you'll never understand." Without warning, Drax lunged at me, his blade drawn, the sharp edge reflecting the flickering light from the disabled holographic systems. But I was faster. With a quick sidestep, I drew my own weapon, a human-made plasma blade, light but lethal. As Drax swung at me, I parried the blow with ease, using his momentum to spin him around. "This is what you don't understand," I said through gritted teeth. "We're adaptable. We don't need to rely on strength alone. We use what we have, and we make it work." The battle that followed was intense. The Katuri, now unarmed, charged forward with their natural strength. But without their advanced technology, they were nothing more than beasts. My team fought back with precision, using every advantage they could. The Sanos, relying too heavily on their minds, found themselves thrown off balance as their power faded without their systems. And Drax? He was no match for the sheer grit and ingenuity of a human fighter. I saw Koresh try to rally his troops, barking orders, but his words fell on deaf ears. His warriors were no longer the well-oiled machine they once were. The EMP pulse had crippled their command structure, leaving them scattered and disoriented. It wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to tilt the battlefield in our favor. As the battle raged on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. For the first time, we were no longer the underdogs. We were in control. And we were fighting not just for survival, but for our place in the galaxy. The Sanos, realizing they were losing ground, attempted to retreat, but it was too late. My team had already positioned themselves strategically, cutting off their escape routes. Eric's, once so sure of his intellect, was now a cornered animal. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, but I wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed. "We've fought long enough," I said, standing tall. "You wanted humanity to bow down, but we don't bend to anyone. Not you, not anyone." Eric's eyes darted around, assessing the situation. He knew he had no choice but to submit. The Sanos had underestimated humanity's resilience. They had relied on intellect, but we had relied on something far more powerful, the will to survive. "Captain," one of my officers said, his voice low. "We've secured the chamber. The Katuri and Zentari are in retreat." "Good," I said, lowering my weapon. "Let's make sure they remember who they're dealing with." As the battle came to a close, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. We had won, but this was only the beginning. Humanity had shown the galaxy that we were no longer willing to be pawns in the game of the powerful. We had proven that we would fight for our place in the stars, and no one would ever underestimate us again. The atmosphere in the galactic Concord's chamber had shifted. It was no longer a place of negotiation or diplomacy, it was a battlefield, and we had thrown down the gauntlet. The Katuri, Sanos, and Zentari had realized something they never expected: humanity wasn't here to play by their rules anymore. We were here to fight, and to win. I stood tall, my plasma blades still crackling with energy, my team gathered around me, waiting for the next move. The Concord's leaders were scattered, but they were far from defeated. Koresh, the Katuri leader, had retreated with a handful of his warriors, his reptilian eyes filled with pure hatred. Drax, the Zentari warlord, was injured but still alive, and Erix, the Sanos strategist, had vanished into the shadows, likely trying to regroup with his remaining forces. But I knew one thing for certain: they were no longer the ones in control. "We can't let them escape," I said, my voice low but steady. "They need to know that this galaxy won't be theirs for the taking anymore." My second-in-command, Sergeant Lawson, nodded. "Understood, Captain. The other delegates are in hiding. They're scared. But they'll regroup, they'll be back with reinforcements." I turned to him, meeting his eyes. "And when they come, we'll be ready for them." It had been a risk, activating the EMP pulse when we did. It wasn't just a message to the Concord, it was a gamble. Humanity's greatest strength had always been our adaptability, but without the technology we relied on for defense, we would be at a disadvantage in the open space. The Concord's advanced weaponry, their fleets, their armies, they all depended on technology. Now, most of that was offline. But even with the advantage, I knew it wouldn't last forever. And if the Concord's forces were anything like what I'd just faced, we needed to move fast. "We have to strike now," I said, my eyes scanning the darkened room. "Before they can recover." We moved swiftly. My team was trained for situations like this. We were experts in using the environment to our advantage, blending in with shadows, moving without detection. The Concord's leaders would be hiding, but they wouldn't stay hidden for long. They were too proud, too sure of their own superiority. The more we pressed, the harder they would fight. We navigated through the corridors of Vernal 7, staying low and making no noise. The alien architecture around us, grand and imposing, had been designed to intimidate, and it did. But it wasn't enough to break us. We had fought on Earth's desolate landscapes, survived alien creatures that were meant to tear us apart. This was nothing. We had a galaxy to save. We arrived at the main hall just as the first wave of reinforcements arrived. Koresh, with his reptilian warriors, had returned, but he was not alone. Erix and his Sanos troops, moving with precision and cold calculation, flanked them. And behind them, the Zentari war machines lumbered forward, massive and relentless. They were stronger than us in raw power, but they had learned nothing from their earlier mistakes. "Captain, they're setting up a perimeter," Lawson reported from the rear. I took a deep breath. This was it. We had no time to waste. "Move in," I commanded, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Take them down." We rushed into the fray. I was the first to engage. My plasma blade hummed in my hands as I cut through the first few Katuri warriors, their scales reflecting the blade's heat as it sliced through their defenses. They were fast, but I was faster. I ducked under a powerful swipe, feeling the air rush past my face as I lunged forward, severing the limb of another warrior. "Keep pushing," I yelled to my team. "Don't stop until they're out of here." The Zentari, never ones to hesitate in a fight, surged forward with all their might. Drax, now on his feet, led the charge, his massive sword cleaving through the air. But he was slow. His injuries had weakened him, and that was his mistake. I met him head-on, my blade meeting his with a resounding clash. We locked eyes as our weapons clashed, the force of his strike shaking the ground beneath us. But I had something he didn't: agility. The Zentari fought with raw strength, but humanity fought with wit. I slid to the side, narrowly avoiding another strike, and drove my blade into his side. Drax grunted in pain but didn't falter. "You're strong, human," he sneered. "But not strong enough." I didn't reply. Instead, I twisted my blade, severing his connection to the weapon's power supply. The sword sputtered, losing its edge. Drax let out a roar, attempting to throw a punch, but I ducked under his arm and came up behind him, landing a clean strike to his back. The Zentari warlord crumpled to the floor. "We're not done yet," Lawson shouted from across the room. The Katuri were regrouping, moving with an intensity that matched the urgency of their situation. Koresh was commanding them with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. He saw the tide of battle turning against him and knew that if he didn't act now, the Katuri's dominance in the galaxy would be over. But it was too late. Humanity had already proven that we weren't the weak, fearful species they thought we were. We were Deathworlders, and we had a thirst for survival. Erix, the Sanos leader, stood at the back of the room, his mind clearly working at full capacity. He was analyzing the situation, calculating his next move. But in doing so, he had underestimated one key factor: he didn't account for the unpredictability of humanity. We didn't follow patterns. We didn't always play by the rules. I watched him as he signaled for his forces to retreat, his eyes narrowing as he realized the battle was lost. But his retreat was futile. My team had already encircled the room, cutting off every escape route. The moment Erix turned to leave, I launched myself at him, landing a clean strike to his midsection. "You underestimated us," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The game has changed." Erix staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief. This can't be. You're nothing but a chaotic species. A dying breed." "We don't die," I said. "We survive." With one final, decisive strike, I silenced him. The Sanos leader crumpled to the floor, his mind no longer able to manipulate the battlefield. And with him, the heart of the Concord's leadership had been cut out. The Katuri, Sanos, and Zentari forces were in disarray. The Concord was broken. The silence that followed the chaos was deafening. My team stood around me, panting, bloodied but unbowed. We had done it. We had turned the tide. Humanity had taken its place at the table, not as pawns, but as the kings of our own fate. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice low but resolute. "Let the galaxy know, the Deathworlders are no longer a joke." And with that, humanity's place in the stars was secured. No one would ever forget the day the Deathworlders stopped playing nice. The smoke was still thick in the air, the remnants of battle swirling around us. The sound of blasters and plasma weapons echoed faintly in the distance, but the room was quiet now. The galactic Concord had been shattered, its leaders either defeated or on the run. Yet the victory felt hollow, incomplete. I knew we had only won the first battle, the real war was just beginning. We had destroyed their command structure. We had crushed their elite forces. But the reality was far grimmer. The Katuri, Sanos, and Zentari weren't going to simply accept defeat. Their pride would demand vengeance, and the stakes had never been higher. The Concord was broken, but its pieces were still dangerous. "Captain, we've secured the outer perimeter," Lawson reported, his voice steady but laced with tension. "But Koresh and his Katuri are pulling back. They've sent word, they're preparing for a counterattack." I nodded, my mind already working through the implications. Koresh wouldn't give up easily. The Katuri, as brutal as they were, still had a significant force, and their fleet was on standby. It wouldn't take long for them to regroup. And the Zentari? Drax, while defeated, wasn't the type to lick his wounds and surrender. The remaining Sanos forces were likely plotting their next move. "We need to hit them before they can mobilize," I said. "We can't give them time to rebuild their strength." I looked to the officers around me. Each one was battle-hardened, experienced in the brutal tactics we had used to take down the Concord's leadership. But we all knew the next battle would be the hardest. We had no illusions. They would come back stronger, angrier. "Move out, now," I ordered. "We can't afford to wait." My team was efficient. Every one of us knew our roles, and we moved with a deadly precision. We knew the Katuri's base of operations on Vernal 7, a heavily fortified position, but that base was crawling with enemy soldiers. We couldn't afford a prolonged siege. We needed a surgical strike. If we didn't take down their leadership now, the Katuri would rally their forces and counterattack with everything they had. As we moved through the corridors, the air was thick with the remnants of the battle. The atmosphere felt charged, the tension palpable. But it wasn't just the alien forces we had to worry about anymore. There were those among us, those we trusted, who had their own plans. As we neared the Katuri stronghold, I felt the first tremors of doubt creep into my mind. Something didn't feel right. My instincts, honed from years of combat, were screaming at me, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Still, I pushed it aside. Doubt had no place in battle. It was time to focus. The team breached the Katuri compound with ease. The EMP pulse had crippled their advanced tech, and their defenses were slower, more reactive. We hit them fast, striking from the shadows, clearing the way for our most dangerous weapon, the EMP's secondary effect. As our forces cleared the compound, the power systems began to flicker back to life. Koresh and his warriors were starting to regroup. But what they didn't realize was that their high-tech arsenal had been rendered useless. Our forces were pushing forward, unstoppable in their ferocity. And then it happened. Just as I was about to signal the final push to eliminate Koresh and secure our victory, a single shot rang out. It was sharp, precise, and unmistakable. The shot came from behind me, and I barely had time to react. I turned, heart pounding, to see a figure emerge from the shadows. It was Captain Reese, one of my most trusted officers, or so I thought. His gun was aimed directly at me. "Reese, what the hell are you doing?" I barked, taking a step back, my hand instinctively reaching for my weapon. He didn't lower his gun. His face was expressionless, his eyes cold. "I'm doing what needs to be done, Captain." For a moment, I couldn't believe it. Reese had been with us from the beginning. He had fought by my side, bled with us, and had always followed my orders without question. Now, here he was, standing against us. "Why?" I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You've been with us through all of this, Reese. What changed?" He hesitated, then spoke, his voice quieter but still firm. "You don't understand. The Concord is inevitable. They are the true power in this galaxy. Humanity's rise, as impressive as it is, was always a temporary blip. You're outmatched. Outgunned. I've been promised a place among the victors, if I side with them now." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You've been playing both sides?" "I did what I had to," Reese said, his eyes narrowing. "You led us into a war we can't win. The Katuri, Sanos, and Zentari? They'll unite, crush us, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I'm choosing the side that will win." I felt a wave of anger wash over me, but beneath it, I couldn't deny the sting of betrayal. This wasn't just an enemy on the battlefield. This was a person I had trusted, someone who had once been my ally. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside me. "Humanity doesn't bow down. We survive. And we fight. You chose your side, Reese. But you're not going to win today." The moment the words left my mouth, I acted. I drew my weapon in a flash, moving faster than he expected. My shot struck his weapon, knocking it from his hand before he could react. Before he could recover, I was on him, pinning him to the ground. "You don't get to make that choice," I said, holding him there, my face inches from his. "You don't get to decide the fate of humanity." "I do." Reese struggled beneath me, but he knew it was over. His eyes, once filled with certainty, were now clouded with regret. "You can't win this, Kayla. You'll lose. You'll all lose." I didn't let go. I couldn't. This was a betrayal, not just of me, but of everything we had fought for. "Then I'll make sure we lose on our terms, Reese. Not on theirs." With one final push, I incapacitated him, securing him for later. We couldn't afford to let him go free. We had no idea how far his betrayal ran, and for all I knew, there were more like him hidden in our ranks. With Reese neutralized, I signaled the team to press forward. The Katuri stronghold was now within our grasp, and the last of their resistance was crumbling. But as we pushed onward, the reality of what had just happened hung in the air. A trusted officer had betrayed us. The cost of victory was rising with every passing minute. As we entered the final stretch of the Katuri compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Reese's words echoed in my mind, "The Concord is inevitable." But humanity wasn't about to bow to inevitability. We were about to show the galaxy that we would never be slaves to anyone again. The Katuri stronghold had fallen. The battle, though brutal, had been won, but the true cost of victory was still settling in. Reese's betrayal was a wound that would take longer to heal, a reminder that even among those we trusted, the shadows of doubt could always find a way in. We had defeated their forces, crippled their military might, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. I stood in the war room, the dim lights flickering as I studied the map of Vernal 7, trying to make sense of what was happening. The Katuri, Sanos, and Zentari had retreated, but they were far from broken. They were regrouping, rearming, and I knew what that meant. They would return with everything they had, and we would be there to meet them. "Captain," Lawson's voice broke through the tension. He had been at my side through it all, and I could see the weariness in his eyes. "The Katuri are gone for now, but the Sanos are organizing a fleet. The Zentari are sending reinforcements from their homeworld." "I know," I said, my voice steady but tired. "They'll come for us. But we have to be ready." The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the technology around us. My team was scattered, recovering from the battle, but they were as ready as I was. We had no choice but to prepare for the storm that was coming. The Concord's remnants would not let us go without a fight. "We're ready, Captain," Lawson said. "We've got a plan to hit them before they hit us." I nodded, turning back to the map. "We'll need to hit hard. No hesitation. We'll make it clear that Earth won't bow down to anyone. If we let them think they have a chance to regroup, it'll be the end for us." "We'll make sure that doesn't happen," Lawson replied. "We've already crippled their tech. It'll take them time to rebuild." That was true. The EMP pulse had done more than just disable their weapons. It had destabilized their communication, disrupted their supply lines, and delayed their fleet. We had the upper hand, but only for a short time. If we didn't strike now, we would be at a disadvantage again. We were ready. There was no turning back. "Prepare the fleet," I ordered, my voice sharp and commanding. "Get the troops in position. We leave in 20. As the team moved into action, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Reese's betrayal still weighed heavily on my mind. His words echoed in my ears. "You can't win this," he had been so sure, so confident in his belief that humanity was doomed. But I refused to believe it. We were stronger than he thought. We had always been stronger than anyone gave us credit for. The fleet was mobilized, and soon we were in the hangar, boarding our ships. The hum of the engines was a steady reminder that the fight wasn't over. We were heading straight into enemy territory, and the risks were high. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not be crushed. We would not fall in the face of overwhelming odds. The Sanos fleet appeared on the horizon, their ships moving like a well-oiled machine, precise and deliberate. The Katuri weren't far behind, their massive warships roaring through space. But we were ready. My team was prepared, and Earth had sent its best. We wouldn't just survive this, we would make them regret underestimating us. I gave the order, and the fleet surged forward, locking in on our targets. The battle began in a blur of flashing lights and deafening explosions. The Sanos, with their superior intellect, were quick to adapt, but not quick enough. We had already anticipated their moves, countering with tactics that no one had seen coming. The Zentari, as brutal as they were, tried to break through our lines, but our speed and precision made them falter. The Katuri, who had once seemed so formidable, were now on the back foot. Their once unshakable confidence had been shattered, and their forces were scattering. It was like watching a beast whose fangs had been pulled, its claws no longer as sharp. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer the threat they had been. I watched the battlefield unfold before me, my mind calculating every move. The EMP pulse had done its job, but we still had the advantage of human ingenuity. We didn't just fight with strength. We fought with strategy, with heart, and with an understanding of what it meant to fight for survival. Every blow, every move we made was a testament to that. The enemy had underestimated us at every turn, and now they were paying the price. "Captain, we've got them on the run," Lawson reported, his voice crackling over the comms. "The Katuri are pulling back. The Sanos fleet is retreating." I couldn't believe it. The enemy, once so sure of their victory, was fleeing. It wasn't a complete victory yet, but it was a start. "Don't let them escape," I said. "We finished this today." We pressed forward, relentless in our pursuit. The Katuri had underestimated us, and now they were seeing the consequences. Their ships were fleeing, retreating to the farthest reaches of space, but they weren't fast enough. We hit them where it hurt, crippling their fleets, taking out their command ships, and leaving their forces scattered and broken. And then it happened. In the chaos of the final assault, as I watched the remnants of the enemy forces crumble, I saw something that made my heart stop. A ship, a massive Katuri warship, broke off from the main fleet, heading straight toward us. Its engines were firing at full power, and it was coming in fast. "Too fast, Captain." Lawson's voice was urgent. "They're coming straight for us. It's a suicide run." I barely had time to react. The Katuri warship slammed into our fleet, a massive explosion lighting up the void of space. The impact rocked our ship, throwing me off balance. For a moment, everything went dark. The ship's alarms blared, and I could hear the sounds of emergency systems kicking in, but I had no idea what had happened. My head was spinning, my vision blurring. When I came to, I was in the cockpit, Lawson beside me, his face pale but focused. "We're still alive, Captain." "But the fleet." I didn't need him to finish. The blast had taken out a significant portion of our ships. The Katuri had gone out in a blaze of fury, taking as many of us down as they could in their final act of defiance. But it didn't matter. They had lost. The battle was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. I stood up, my legs unsteady but my resolve unwavering. We won this battle. But the war isn't over. Not yet. We've shown them that Earth won't back down, and we'll make sure they never forget it. As we made our way back to Earth, the gravity of what we had accomplished began to sink in. We had faced the impossible, and we had won. The universe had learned the hard way: humanity was not something to be ignored, not something to be crushed. We had proven ourselves, and we would keep proving it, time and time again. The day the Deathworlders stopped playing nice? That was the day the galaxy changed forever.